What's up, everyone? I'm Jeffrey Way, and today we're going to be talking about the 960 framework. First, I want to just talk for one quick minute about it. Up until about 2 weeks ago, I fell in the group that said you should not use CSS frameworks. They serve no purpose. CSS is just not that hard. Well, last week, just for fun, I decided to download the 960 framework and just play around with it. I can honestly tell you within 5 minutes, I completely changed my tune. Once you play around with the framework and realize how much time it can potentially save you, I think you too will change your mind. So if you've ever read a tutorial on Blueprint or 960, I guarantee you if you go down to the comments, you'll see a huge discussion go about from the people, the advocates, and the people who are against it. I have a strong feeling that the majority of the people against it have not actually played around with it. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to download the framework. We're just going to play around with it. And you can watch and you decide for yourself if it's a smart idea for you. Will this work for all your websites? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But for some, I promise you it will save you a great deal of time. Now, second, if you are brand new to CSS, I would highly recommend to do not use this framework. You need to have a solid foundation with CSS because, actually similar to jQuery, you're going to, if you go into this framework without knowing a great deal of CSS, you're going to be causing more harm than help. Because certain things are designated to a style sheet that you very rarely look at. And you need to know what's going on when you set these classes. You need to know that in the background, these divs are being floated, the display's being changed. So I recommend stick with it for about a year or two with CSS before you work with a framework. So let's go ahead. I'm going to open Chrome and let's get right into it. I'm going to go to the website, and to be honest, I just not sure what it's called. I think it's 960.gs. Yes. Okay. I highly recommend on your own time, go and read all of the documentation, and most importantly, check out the demo. So, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to move over to Firefox so I can zoom out. But you can see right off the bat, it offers two different grids, a 12-column grid and a 16-column grid. Okay, now I'm in Firefox. I can zoom out. And you can see they offer a 12-column grid, and if I scroll down again, we have a 16-column grid. Today, we're going to be working just with the 12-column, but you can move back and forth however you like. So, keep that in mind. You might even want to bookmark that, especially at first, to see how you should be naming your classes. But let's go back, and let's go ahead and download the framework. I'm going to save the file, and minimize this, and it's going to give me this file right here. So let's go ahead and extract that, and go ahead and delete the zip file. Okay, let's take a look and see what this is going to provide us. We can see right off the bat, we have a README file. Go ahead and check that out, but when you're done, you can delete it. You have sketch sheets, which are very nice that you can print out to use when you're sketching out a new application. For now, though, we don't need that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I'm a big fan of getting things as simplified as they can possibly be. Licenses, this details how you can use it. It's pretty liberal, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Templates, this is definitely nice. Whether you're in Fireworks or Photoshop, you can import one of these template files, and you can immediately work off a grid when you're designing. Once again, I already have that on my system, so I'm going to delete this. Okay, and this brings us to the meat and potatoes. We have the demo, which is the exact same thing as we have right here. But the main thing we need are the CSS files. So 960 comes with the 960.css, Eric Meyer's reset, and then just a very basic text.css just to reapply some proper styling. Now, I don't want this to be minified because you may want to edit yourself, so you can compress it when you're finished, right before you deploy your application. So all we need are these three files. So let's open this back up. And I'm going to take this compressed, and I'm just going to drag it into my desktop, because that's all we need. So delete that, and I'm going to change this to, let's say, 960. Okay, so now we're going to start building our first very simple web app just to give you an idea of how easy it is. So I'm going to open, let's use Dreamweaver today. Okay, Dreamweaver's open. Now, I am a big fan of having just kind of a template folder that I use every time I begin an application. If you're newer or you don't do this, just think about it for a minute. How many things do you duplicate every single time you make a website? Every time you use JavaScript, are you having to go through the process of importing jQuery? Do you find that you compensate for IE6 in every application? If so, why not create just a template that you can use for each one? So this is what I have. It's called template. And if I open it up, we have a JS folder, and this contains my dd_bladed ping. That's a transparency fix. I use that in most websites. And I have a CSS file containing my own reset, and then just a blank default.css file. And then we have index.html. So let's go ahead and open that up. There's nothing special here. You can use your own or you can start from scratch. So I'm going to open and browse to that folder. But first, I'm going to copy this so I don't overwrite the original. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to change the name to, we'll just say 960 screencast. Okay. Come back and I'm going to open that folder. So we'll browse to it, 960 screencast, index.html. And you can see here is what I've decided I need at the very beginning. And then if you need to, for example, if JavaScript's not required, you can simply remove it. I import the reset. I import my blank default.css file. I go ahead and add conditional statements for IE6. I import jQuery. Just for the record, new 1.3 is out, so I've already updated, so I'm now referencing the latest version, and the beginning of any scripting, and just an opening container div. So it's kind of off topic, but I do think it saves me so much time, and I recommend you do it too. So we are not going to be doing any JavaScript, so I can get rid of this, and no IE6. And I can get rid of the reset since there's a reset provided with 960. However, if you want, you can just use your own and get rid of that one. It does not matter. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do in our application is import 960. So I'm going to open up our application, open up the CSS folder, and let's just drag 960 in. Or if I want, I can just grab these files and bring them in, but I'm going to keep them in their own folder. Okay. Just like that. So we have 3 files that we need to reference. So, in addition to my basic CSS file, let's do another one. Linkrel equals style sheet. And href equals, we're going to browse to the CSS folder, 960. And first, let's get the 960 one. And then copy it 2 times. And the next one, I believe, is text. And the third one is reset. Let's go ahead and double check to make sure that's correct. 960 reset text. Okay, so now we're referencing all of the proper files. We can get started building our website. So let's return to the demo page and take a deeper look. We're going to be working with the 12-column grid, as I said earlier. And you can see here, by default, there is 10 pixels of margins applied to each div that has a class of one of these grids. So you can see here on the edge we have 10 pixels, and then each grid or little span here has 10 pixels on the left and right, which would actually add up to 20. So if you scroll down here, the way we can, let's say for example we want to create a sidebar that's 220 pixels wide, like this one. Well, if you count the number of grids, we have 1, 2, 3. So the way we designate it is when we create our parent div, we add a class of grid underscore and then the number of columns that we want. So we would do grid underscore 3. So why don't we just create your basic bread and butter, a header, sidebar, main content, footer, okay? Now, you wouldn't necessarily need to do that with the 960 framework, but what happens when you're doing a magazine layout and you have all of these sub areas where you have multiple columns and it gets really complicated, and with floating it makes it even more confusing. So let's go in And the first thing that we need to do is specify a container div. Now, we can still give it an ID of container, that's fine. But we also need to give it a class of container underscore, and then either 12 or 16, depending on whether you're using the 12-column grid or the 16-column grid. I'm going to use 12. Now, one of the biggest gripes that people have is they say, well, what is the benefit of adding a class of container 12? Now you have no idea what the div is. Well, that's true, but you can always add an ID if it would make things easier. So I can do ID container, and now I know exactly what I'm referring to. Okay, so the first thing that we want is a header. So I'm going to do div ID equals header. Class is going to be grid underscore something. So how wide do we want our header to be? Well, I want it to span the entire width of the website. Now remember, the width is 960 pixels, hence the name. So we want it to be 940 with 10 pixels margin on the left and right. So you would just count the number of columns. Here we have 12. So I'm going to do grid underscore 12. And let's just do some kind of generic. This is my header. Okay. Next, let's do a 3-column layout. Let's do maybe, if we're going to divide 12 by 3, why don't we do 2 sidebars that are 3 columns wide, or 220 pixels each. That would add up to 6 columns, and then we just need to add the difference, which would be another 6. So we'll do 2 sidebars next to each other and then the main content on the right. So we'll do div ID equals secondary 1, class equals grid underscore 3, and the secondary 1. And then let's do another one, and this will be secondary 2. And that one also will be a class of grid 3. So within it, we'll just place some random text. Let me go to lipsum. And who cares? Let's just grab something like that. I can grab it. Okay, come back, and I'm going to paste it into secondary 1. And let's do the same for secondary 2. Okay, so we have our header, secondary 1, secondary 2. Next, let's do the main content. So div ID equals main content. Okay, and we'll do the same thing, just paste in some random text. Okay, so now we have our header, 2 sidebars, main content. Now remember, we need to specify a class for this main content. So we have 3, 3. Now we need to get up to 12, so we'll do class equals grid 6. Now remember that the pixel value for 3, it's going to be 220 pixels wide for each sidebar, and then the 6, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it will be 460 pixels. And all of that adds up to 960. Okay, so the final thing we need to do is just add our standard footer. Div ID equals footer, class equals, and once again, this will span the whole way, so grid 12. My footer. Okay, so let's see what this brings us in the browser. Let me go ahead and indent this real quickly. Okay, so I'm going to come to Preview in Firefox, and this is what it brings us. And I must have made a quick mistake. Default, whoops, that should be, I believe, 960. If we come back, yeah, 960 reset text. So change that, 960. Come back to Firefox, refresh the page, and now this is what it brings us. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see a bit better, And let's go ahead and add some random stylings just to show the backgrounds. Let's do within our container, let's give it a background of, I don't know, just some kind of grayish blue. And once again, I'm going to zoom out as much as I can. And what else? Let's give each of the sidebars kind of a gray color. So we'll do secondary 1 and secondary 2. And once again, this is just random. You don't need to add this. It's just to show you the borders. And finally, I believe we called it main content. And let's give that a background of, let's just do gray too. That's fine. And finally, we need header and footer. Header and footer. Get a background color of, I don't know, brown. Fine. Okay, so you immediately might be thinking, how come the background color isn't showing up on the container div? And this is why I recommend that you have some knowledge of CSS before you come in here. Otherwise, you're not going to know. If you're somewhat experienced, I'm sure you can figure it out. Remember, just because we aren't adding a float to these divs does not mean that it's not still happening. If we come over to the 960 framework, that's exactly what's happening. You see here, this is all of the grids that we're applying. And you can see they're floated to the left. The 10 pixels of margin that I spoke of, those are added. And display inline is added to counter the double margin bug in IE6, which, if you're unaware, doubles the margins. So by adding display inline, you can get rid of that. So what I need to do is when I have a parent div with many floated children, I need to come back and make sure that I clear it. Now I could do that one way by adding a clear div. There's a clear fix hack, or why don't we just set, not on header, let's go back to our container and set overflow to hidden, and that will force it to contain its children. So let's try that. Overflow hidden. Okay, and now it's working. Now it's possible we may have to do another hack for IE6, but let's minimize this a little bit so you can see a bit more. You can immediately see, very simply, we created a 3-column layout. So what I'm going to do right now, we're going to expand upon this, don't worry, but I'm going to copy this, come back to my project, and I'll need to open my default.css file and paste that in. So what I want to do now, we'll close that out and refresh the page. What I'd like to do now is right below this main content, we're going to have some sub-content that will contain 2 divs. Who knows? That could be, about us, maybe your speakers, or whatever you need it to be. But that's going to go in the main content section. So let's come back. Within main content, we're going to add some children. So after the closing paragraph, we're going to add another div, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, let's call it, I don't know. You know what? We may not even need a div. Actually, we probably do. Let's just do call 1, because we don't know what it is. And I'm just going to paste in just a little bit of text, nothing too big. Close that out. Sorry, let me clean this up real quickly. Okay, that's a little bit better. And so we have our div 1. Now let's add a second div. So I'm going to copy that, paste it, and now we have div ID equals call2. So I, as always, need to give these a class. So if we come back, we know that the 6th column is 460 pixels. So we need each of the child divs to be 3 columns wide, correct? Or if we wanted, we could do one that's 2 columns, one that's 4. You can do any combination. I'm just keeping it symmetrical. So we're going to have 2 childs that are grid underscore 3. So class equals grid underscore 3. Class equals grid underscore 3. Now I'm going to give quick styling. And let's just do call 1, call 2. Let's give it a background color of, let's do brown again. So we're going to need to add one more thing, but I want to show you this is something that'll immediately might give you some headaches. So let's come back and see what happens. Refresh the page. And you can see, you can't tell here, but the two divs are on top of each other. So you might immediately think, well, how come those aren't displaying side by side like the others? And the reason is, when you have some children grids nested within a parent grid, you need to add alpha to the, you have to append alpha to the class of the first div and omega to the final div. So right here, I'm going to do a space and add another class called alpha. Now, we are going to take a look at what alpha and omega mean, but I assure you it's actually very simple. It just simply zeroes out the margins. And here, this is our final div, so I'm going to do omega. Come back, refresh the page, and now it's turned into two columns. So you might be thinking, well, there's still the vertical margins and padding. Well, if you want, by default, the 960 only adds left and right margins of about 10 pixels. Not about 10 pixels, exactly 10 pixels. If you want, you can just go and change this to 10 pixels all around, or you can be a bit more specific. So when I change it to 10 pixels all around, now every div that has a class of one of these grids will have 10 pixels all around it. Or you can bring it back to the way it is by default and then specify, the divs within the main content should have 10 pixels of margin. So I'm going to leave it as is. And let's zoom in. So obviously not very pretty, but that's not the intention. We're not building a website. And what I'm showing you here is how easy it is to build a layout. And in all of this, we can get much, much more complicated than this. But it's going to be very, very easy using this to create complex magazine-style layouts. Now, what are some of the cons? Well, one, it's 960 for a reason, and that means you can only use this at 960 pixels. So if you instead want, a 770 pixel layout, you probably should go with something else. So this is only for that. And, obviously anytime you're using a framework, you're going to lose a little bit of flexibility, but I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. So let me real quickly just come back, and something you might do with your divs is you might think, okay, I want some padding here. So what if we went to, let's do secondary content, and we immediately just added some padding of, let's just say, 2 M's. Okay, so you can immediately see it's screwed up the layout completely. So how can you add padding to these divs without breaking the layout? And sometimes with anything, if you have the option, don't apply the padding to the parent div. It can create, many weird issues. So instead, why don't we just add the padding to the paragraphs? So secondary 1, paragraph. Secondary 2, paragraph. Or we could wrap, as you might do anyways, we can wrap the secondary divs and the main content within a parent div of maybe main. And then you would say main P, main H1, etc. And now let's set a padding of 2 M's. And now it doesn't affect the layout at all. So main content, P. And like so. And yeah, so you can immediately see it's just really nice layout, no headaches. So the last step I want to do here is let's come back, paste this in, and see if we have any problems in other browsers. So I'm going to copy this, and let's go into Chrome, paste it in. And you can't see here because I had to adjust my screen to a really low resolution, but it looks just perfect in Chrome. Let's go into IE Tester now. We'll do IE6 tab, IE7. Of course, we're ignoring IE5. Refresh the page, and once again, IE7 looks just great, no problems. Let's see if there's any problems in IE6. No problems at all. So you can immediately see this will save you so much time. Use your brain. There's a lot here that I haven't gone over as far as, padding if you want to add white space. But I recommend, if this is intriguing to you, visit 960.js, look over all the documentation, pay attention to the demo, and look at some of the other websites. You can just build a much cleaner layout using a grid. It'll just save you so much time. So this has been an introductory to the 960 framework. I can guarantee that there's going to be plenty of discussion of people saying, it's a waste of time, it's too bloated. Let's see how bloated it actually is. Okay, when people say, don't use the framework, too bloated. Okay, this is what we're talking about. The 960 is 7K uncompressed. So we could compress that and probably bring it down to 4K or so. The reset file you'd probably have in your application anyway, as is the text. Those are almost, you could almost remove those if you're using your own. So we're talking about too bloated is 4K. Now, keep in mind, not to mention the bloated problem, but you would be adding many of those styles on your own. So remember, it's hardly a framework. It's more of almost just an extra file to save you some time because you're going to do it on your own. So the whole bloated issue is moot. There's no problem at all. So once again, check it out, try it out. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Thank you, everybody. That's been the nettouch.com screencast of the week. See you later. Bye.